Arcanum Theurgy, episode 3. Today, we're going to talk about the circle. We kind of touched upon it last week. We talked a little bit about it, but now we're really going to talk about what the circle really means in a lot of different things. What does the circle represent? And to put it...
Introduce yourself.
Oh, almost forgot.
Yeah.
Getting ahead of myself. I'm Dan Rasanowski.
I'm Joe Schaefer.
We're
going to talk about the circle.
We're going to talk about that circle. So, what is a circle? It's a shape, but what does it mean? A shape that represents totality, wholeness, original perfection, the self, the infinite, eternity, timelessness, all cyclic movement, and good, which Hermes Trismegistus said, he wrote rather, God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. So, Joe, what do you have on the circle yourself?
On just the actual circle, I have from my Oswald Wirth source, Hermetic symbolism and its relation to alchemy and Freemasonry. He has that it represents unity. And you can even see this today, or in modern times, in, for instance, fascist insignia, like Oswald Mosley had, his flag was a lightning bolt inside of a circle, which represented the bolt of action within the circle of unity. And I believe the modern-day National Action in the UK were using something very similar. So even today, that still has that same connotation of unity. Wirth writes that, strictly speaking, we cannot represent unity, and that it would actually be best represented by the mathematical point, which is imperceptible to us. We can only represent it in the center of a circle or at the intersection of a cross. We'll probably talk about the symbolism of the cross in our next episode.
Yeah, I definitely got a little bit on that in here.
So that'll tie in nicely.
Yeah.
This impossibility of representing unity causes us to return to the circle, which is, quote, a traditional emblem of which there is no beginning nor end. I don't know what you had exactly next, but next, for me at least, I was going to get into kind of like the etymology of the actual symbol, the circle with the dot in the middle. So, I don't know, did you have something to kind of lead into that?
A little bit. I have a symbol actually drawn right here. Of course, nobody can see it except you and I, but it is...
Paint a picture for us, Dan.
It is a circle, a big circle. Within the circle, there is a triangle which touches the top, the left and the right sides, does not touch the bottom. It's a triangle. Then within the triangle that touches, there's two corners that only touch the two top faces of the triangle. So it's a little square within that triangle. And then within that square is a circle. And that is a big amalgamation, I guess you could say, of sun, gold, which you were going to say you had something on that as well, because there's also many different symbols for sun and gold.
A lot of this is all tying together, which I think will become apparent, especially by the end of this episode, for all these symbols. Like on our last one, we were talking a lot about all the things coming, like fire, light, sun, gold, masculine, all that coming together. Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess just another sort of description. So Dan has it's a big circle, and inside that is a triangle, and inside that triangle is a square, and inside that square is a circle. I've seen that in places, but I never really knew exactly what that was.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I said. It's just another symbol for sun, for gold in alchemy. It comes up a lot in the occult, of course, but that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you good if I jump into explaining the actual symbol itself?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So this kind of returns a little bit to our last episode about the solar hieroglyph, which can also represent gold, alchemically speaking, as we said. So let's explain the meaning of the actual symbol itself, the circle with a dot in the middle. Oswald Wirth writes, quote, to create means to pull from nothing, but in order that the beings and things that can be pulled out of nothing, in order that the beings and the things that can be that are pulled out of nothingness, it is necessary that they be substantial in their own way. He goes on, quote, this substance is no longer some thing susceptible to being distinguished. It is the thing in itself, outside of all distinctive particularization. If we represent the substance as death, we err, because it is incapable of being essentially living. To fill the universe, it must vibrate without reserve, with infinite dynamism. The vibrations transmit themselves completely in a homogeneous milieu like that which one would attribute to the primordial substance. Nothing stops the waves of the cosmic ocean." Unquote. So, how is the sterility of the empty circle made fruitful? Wirth writes, quote, "Graphically, the response to this question is easy, because it is given by a point marked in the center of the circle." Unquote. This symbol can also represent fertilization, or the embryo, fecundation. But for the alchemists, it represents the sun and gold, as we know from our last episode. Wirth describes it thusly, quote, "A center emanating circular waves, imitating a pebble thrown into water. This is how the ancients saw the animating movement of the cosmos. They imagined a radiation parting from a center and propagating ceaselessly across space, like a light emanating from an illuminated hearth." Unquote. In our last episode, we mentioned how René Guénon points to the similarity between the Latin aurum for gold and the Hebrew aor for light. While Oswald Wirth writes that the Kabbalists understand what I've described above, this emanating force and these cosmic waves. The Kabbalists understand it as Eor Ein Sof. I'm not sure if I'm saying that probably exactly true, but Eor Ein Sof, which means the infinite light. So there's just another sort of connection there. And this Eor Ein Sof, the infinite light, is the agent which brings order to the chaos outside of the celestial lights. And that chaos will kind of be coming up in just a minute, too, as we move on a little bit. But I'll just toss it back to you, Dan.
So, what you're saying is that the circle is extremely important. It means light. It means infinite. It means all possibilities.
It means no beginning, no end.
No end.
Cyclical. Propagation. I just lost some thought I was going to say. But yeah,
that's all right. But yeah, it's super important.
It contains and excludes.
Yeah. So exactly, that's the most important.
Perpetual regeneration. No beginning, no end. Yeah.
No beginning, no end. Everything within it is contained, which is why it's so important for rituals, and it excludes everything outside to keep things away from there. So it's super important.
Could be an important symbol to sort of meditate on.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. A lot of people, if you do a little bit of research, there's a lot of people here and there who do meditate within, whether it be like an actual drawn circle or a circle of candles, something that represents a circle. So it's important. But next, now that we've kind of explained all that, we're going to go to some circles that you've probably seen here and there in books and movies, whatever. The Ouroboros.
Right.
So what the Ouroboros is, it's a dragon or a serpent, usually just a serpent.
Or like a snake.
Snake, yeah. With or without wings. And it is eating its own tail.
Right.
Which, by that, it is effectively creating a circle. So there, again, it's another circle. And this first comes up in...
Yes, it's related to the circle.
Yeah.
It's a circle represented by a snake eating its own tail, so there's another layer of meaning kind of added onto this.
Exactly. So...
Another dimension.
Yeah. So this first comes up, it originates from ancient Egyptian iconography, which is just kind of a little fancy way of saying Egyptian mythology. And the first known appearance, actually, which I didn't even know this until really, delving deep into it, was the appearance of this motif was in the book called the Enigmatic Book of the Netherworld,
okay, which
was an ancient Egyptian funerary text in the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Ooh.
So, that I'm not too sure, like what they were. It's like a funerary text, but I don't know what it meant in terms of funerary text. Like, what were they using it to represent within that context? I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
Was it like all-encompassing, like life and death, just the cycle?
Yeah, and I actually have a lot of stuff on the Ouroboros here, and I think some of that could come through just in going through it.
Yeah, let's hear it, because then I jump...
I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine, because then I'm gonna go into what it kind of represented elsewhere in ancient Egypt. Just a really quick thing. So by all means, let's, I want to hear what you got.
Cool, yeah. So as you basically explained what it is, a snake eating its own tail in a circular shape. So I have here that to open his chapter on the Ouroboros, or One the All, Entopan, which will be explained, Julius Evola, in the Hermetic tradition, writes, quote, "Only when we have succeeded in recapturing a living and, quote, symbolic sensitivity toward everything modern man has fossilized as dead nature and abstract concepts will we arrive at the first principle of the true Hermetic teaching. This principle is unity, and the formula that expresses it can be found in the Chrysopoeia of Cleopatra. One the all, Hen Topan, to which we can connect the Telesma, father of all things, of the Emerald Tablet," unquote. We read some portions, a couple sentences from the Emerald Tablet in our last episode. Evola explains, quote, "The alchemical ideogram of one the all is a circle, a line or movement that encloses within itself and contains in itself both its end and beginning. In Hermeticism, the symbol expresses the universe and, at the same time, the great work of the alchemists. In the Chrysopoeia, it takes the form of a serpent, Ouroboros, biting its own tail, containing within the space of the circle that it creates the Hen Topan." There's a drawing in the Oswald Wirth reference too of exactly this: a serpent eating its own tail, with Hen Topan written in Greek in the middle. Hen Topan just means one the all. Wirth tells us that, quote, "The first matter of the wise First matter of the wise which they put into work is symbolized by the grand serpent no longer forming a circle and biting its tail, but contorted entirely around the moon and partially around the sun." This is another picture that you can see. It'll have a moon with a face on it and a sun with a face on it right above it, and a snake kind of wraps around the moon and goes up around the sun, but doesn't fully wrap around the sun. Right. Sometimes it's on fire too.
That is, and I've seen that.
Yeah, and that's usually pictured, like if you Google Hermes Trismegistus or Trismegistus, there's usually a picture of a guy, Hermes, and then that symbol is like to his right or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So you can see that.
That definitely is something that I got here too. Same exact concept, wrapping around things, which I'll let you finish though, and then I'll bring that up.
Okay. Yeah, I have just some more interesting stuff on the Ouroboros. And it's worth noting, listeners, this is some unique content. Some of the Oswald Wirth book is written in French, so I have to translate that. And then I'm also translating this. What I'm about to read came from Marcelin Berthelot's massive book, collection of ancient Greek alchemists, which is cited in everything. If you read any book about alchemy, it's in there. Julius Evola makes reference to it. My book, The Alchemy Reader, makes reference to it. Carl Jung references it all the time in his alchemical writings. So this is it's a foundational work, often made reference to. But so in the first volume of his massive collection of ancient Greek alchemists, in the section on the lexicon of the Chrysopoeia, we read of the Ouroboros. Quote. This is kind of a longish quote. So, quote, "This is the mystery. The serpent Ouroboros, biting its own tail, is the composition that in its other is devoured and liquefied, dissolved and transformed by fermentation. It becomes a deep green, and the color of gold derives from it. From this composition, the red color called cinnabar is derived, the cinnabar of the philosophers. Its stomach and back are the color of saffron. Its head is a dark green. Its 4 feet constitute the tetrasomy, which is just a one word combining. It's one word that means all 4 imperfect metals: lead, copper, tin, and iron. Going on. Its 3 ears are the 3 sublimated vapors. The one furnishes the other with blood, and the one engenders the other. Nature enjoys nature. Nature charms nature. Nature triumphs over nature. Nature dominates nature. And this does not mean one nature opposed to another nature, but one and the same nature. Apply your intelligence to these matters, and you will not fall in error, but work seriously and without negligence until you have seen the term of your research. A serpent is lying, guarding this temple, and he who has tamed it, begin by sacrificing it. Then flay it, and after having taken its flesh all the way down to the bones, make a footboard at the entry of the temple. Climb over it, and you will find the sought object. because the priest, before the man of copper, has changed color and nature and has become a man of silver. Some days later, if you want, you will find him changed into a man of gold. So this is where like alchemical writings they just seem to go way out there.
Yeah.
It's highly symbolic. So he's not only is it explaining the meaning of the symbol, but he's talking about how the symbol is viewed and used to some extent in the great work, in the royal art.
Well, it sounds like it's just another representation of taking everything, breaking it completely down, and using that to get to the ultimate goal.
But it's important to point out, like he said here too, is it's not some foreign nature coming onto this nature and taking it over. You use the same nature, which is perfectly encapsulated in the symbol of the Ouroboros. The snake eats its own tail. It kills itself to keep itself alive.
Yeah, so you don't kill yourself and then grab outside forces to rebuild yourself. You're just, like you just said, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so this is just very, very, it's very interesting stuff, and I'm also in the process of trying to translate some French work by this guy named Matt Joy. He writes about Tao a lot, and this ties into that with these forces coming and going. I'm sure you're going to mention some stuff about that, but let's see. I can pretty much wrap up my main thing here on the Ouroboros with just a couple more seconds. It is worth noting that Serlot, in Dictionary of Symbolism, points out a connection between the serpent and Mercury, the dual god.
Oh, okay.
And Berthelot also notes in this lexicon I was just reading from that the ejaculation of the serpent is Mercury. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
I do have a very interesting passage I want to read from an anonymous text from the 8th or 9th century. We also read a small portion of it in our last episode. It's basically referred to as the poem of the philosopher Theophrastos upon the sacred art. And this is just talking about the dragon. Let me sip some water real quick. I also want to point out that, as you said earlier, the Ouroboros can be a dragon, a serpent, like from the Garden of Eden type serpent, which you don't know exactly, or a snake, And as we see, Berthelot was describing basically like a dragon serpent thing with, a stomach, 4 feet, 3 ears, So just showing that, it doesn't always have to be just your basic like snake, like a garter snake.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So I'm just going to read a little bit here, and it begins like this, quote, "A dragon springs therefrom which, when exposed in horse's excrement for 20 days, devours its tail till naught thereof remains. This dragon, whom they Ouroboros call, is white in looks and spotted in the skin, and has a form and shape most strange to see. When he was born, he sprang out from the warm and humid substance of united things, the close embrace of male and female kind, a union which occurred within the sea, brought forth this dragon, as already said, a monster scorching all the earth with fire, with all his might and panoply displayed. He swims and comes unto a place within the currents of the Nile. His gleaming skin and all the bands which girdle him around are bright as gold and shine with points of light. This dragon, seize and slay with skillful art within the sea, and wield with speed thy knife, with double edges hot and moist, and then, his carcass having cleft in twain, lift out the gall and bear away its blackened form, all heavy with the weight of earthy bile. Great clouds of streaming mist ascend therefrom, and these become on rising dense enough to bear away the dragon from the sea, and lift him upward to a station warm, the moisture of the air his lightened shape and form sustaining. Be most careful then, all burning of his substance to avoid, and change its nature to a stream divine. With quenching draughts, then pour the mercury into a gaping urn, and when its stream of sacred fluid stops to flow, then wash away with care the blackened dross of earth. Thus having brightened what the darkness hid, within the dragon's entrails thou wilt bring a mystery unspeakable to light, for it will shine exceeding bright and clear, and, being tinged a perfect white throughout, will be revealed with wondrous brilliancy, its blackness having been changed to white, for when the cloud-sent water flows thereon, it cleanses every dark and earthy stain." So again, kind of echoing what from the Berthelot passage, and it also talks about this is when we get into the process, we'll talk about the Negredo phase and the Albedo phase, and the negrification of the body and stuff. And then from there you move on to the whitening stage. So that all kind of comes through in that. There's one interesting footnote in there that I want to just make reference to that the translator included. He says, one of alchemy's most ancient symbols, the tail-biting serpent, has many significations, e.g. the all, the unity of matter, eternity, rejuvenation, the circular nature of the alchemical process, with the incontrovertibility of the elements, and especially in this passage, Mercurius, the agent of transformation that both kills or is killed and restores. And let me just glance, what was this other one? Oh yeah, this is another interesting one, which kind of we already mentioned. He says, the identification of the dragon with Mercury is here made explicit. Throughout this passage, the images of heat and moisture and changes in color from black to white, albedo or albification, evoke the physical processes of alchemy. So, yep.
All right.
Yeah, just so you know, Dan, I mean, we'll move on. The only other thing that I have is I have just a little bit of what Sir Lowe has to say on the Ouroboros itself. So, I mean, we can just kind of run through that quick, towards the end. So,
sure.
If you have a logical progression here, feel free.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I'm going to go forward here and then jump back a little bit. So, what you just said, the whole sacred, Ouroboros is a very sacred symbol in alchemy. And that... it is linked to the opus of an alchemist.
Right, the work.
The philosopher's stone, the ability to take the lead, quote unquote, and make it gold, quote unquote, again. So, extremely important that it goes back from the beginning of all of this. And then, going back to the Ouroboros a little bit, further back, I was talking about it comes up in ancient Egypt, all of that. It represents, or it may represent, the union. So again, you were talking about how it goes around the sun and the moon. It represents the union of Ra and Osiris, because there's a lot of depictions of them together, but with the Ouroboros around their head, their neck, and their feet, or it might be the head and their hands and their feet, but again, all-encompassing around them, creating a union. So, I just thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I never knew. I don't know much about Egypt in general. So.
I really don't either. But looking into this, it's depicted a lot, and I don't think people really notice it because it's not. The serpent isn't necessarily what you'd expect to see in hieroglyphics. It's probably a little bit more obscure than that's a snake, that's a dragon. It's probably a little So, it represents a union between the gods Ra the god Ra and the goddess Osiris. So there's that. I touched upon, how it's the most important, one of the most important symbols in alchemy to, the opus for the Philosopher's Stone. And then I also have here that, again, going back to the whole circle thing, there's yin and yang. Now, the yin and yang is a ancient Chinese Taoist symbol, and it means...
It's circular, too.
It's circular.
Yeah.
It is circular, and of course, within the circle, there's more imagery. There's a line, there's two... So, there's imagery within the circle. Going back to when we started, always something in that circle, usually to represent something. And it represents the two great... let's see, opposite principles. So, yin and yang, you always think opposites, the yin and the yang. So for the yang, it is the male, light and positive, and the yin, female, dark and negative. So there's a duality there. Black and white represent the Gnostic duality of existence. So that's kind of the yin and yang. That's where that comes into the Gnosticism, the duality of existence, so on and so forth. And anything to add to that, Joe? It sounds like you had something.
This will actually just wrap up everything that I have because this is perfectly ties in. I have just some stuff from Sir Lowe's entry in Dictionary of Symbolism on the Ouroboros, and he writes that it appears principally among the Gnostics, which I think, did you say you had some?
The Gnostics? Yeah. So let's see. Blah blah blah. Both halves, the black and the white, both halves of the yin and yang represent. The Gnostic duality of existence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's Serlo just says it's principally a symbol among the Gnostics and can be a dragon, snake, or serpent biting its own tail. He writes, quote, in some versions of the Ouroboros, the body is half light and half dark, alluding in this way to the successive counterbalancing of opposing principles illustrated in the Chinese yin-yang symbol for instance, so unquote, exactly what we were just going over. He also explains that, quote, the Ouroboros biting its own tail is symbolic of self-fecundation, or the primitive idea of a self-sufficient nature, a nature that is, which, a la Nietzsche, continually returning, with a cyclic pattern to its own beginning. Yeah, eternal recurrence was what I was trying to think of earlier,
okay.
the Nietzschean idea. So, unquote all that.
Okay.
He one more thing. He ends his entry on the Ouroboros by mentioning a Venetian manuscript on alchemy, which depicts the Ouroboros as half black, symbolizing earth and night, and half white, denoting heaven and light.
And that's exactly what I have here. But, like I was saying, exactly. It's represented a ton of different ways, black and white, and then when you go into different religions, which we talked about before, religions, there's all one center, there's one focal point for all religions, but they all interpret this differently.
Well, there's like different ways of pointing at a truth.
Exactly.
To some extent.
Very, very true. So that being said, there's the Ouroboros, and then kind of like the Chinese, the Taoist is the yin and the yang.
Right, and then this cyclical notion of, almost like just continual return. Well, it even popped up, like we just said, it popped up in, what would that be, 19th century Europe with Nietzsche, eternal recurrence, eternal return.
So it's always just, the principle's always there, it just gets reiterated over and over and over again.
Which is very, now we're going, I just felt like, that just felt weird because even the idea is eternally recurring.
Well, when you talk about it,
you just keep coming back to it.
So, and then at the beginning of this episode, to kind of wrap this all up, I'm not sure how long we've been going here, but you talked about the cross.
Yes.
So, to kind of start to wrap things up here, in the occult, a circle is used in a lot of rituals. I'm not going to go too in depth because, of course, we keep saying this, but this will be, for later episodes.
Right. Yeah. In the beginning, we're just trying to get the symbols down.
Exactly.
Because it's like learning the grammar for alchemy, hermeticism, occultism. Mm-hmm. So we're just giving you grammar lessons, basically, which is what initiates you.
Yeah.
So by the time we're done with all these symbols, you, listener, will be initiated.
Exactly. So hopefully that will be the case. And as I was saying, circle is used in a lot of rituals. Now, there is a couple different circles which a lot of people know, a lot of people see, but they don't really know the meaning behind them.
Okay.
There is the inverted pentagram, which symbolizes evil, conjures evil spirits. Ritual, again, it's a circle with a graphic in the middle, going back to what we said before. There is the pentagram, and everyone knows the pentagram. Symbolizes, the 5 elements. So, earth, wind, fire, water, and air.
Right. Yeah, which we'll be talking about in our next episode.
Mm-hmm. And within the pentagram, there's 5 points. Each touch the edge of the circle, and each point is represented, or each element is represented by a point within that circle, on the pentagram. So, you. That also comes up. So again, things touching the edge of the circle they mean something.
Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Everything means something. These things aren't drawn arbitrarily.
No,
they weren't conceived of arbitrarily. Which is very important to drill into people's heads.
Exactly, because like a circle with a dot in the middle, that means something completely different than a circle with maybe, for example, I'm not sure if this is a thing. We're going to have to do more research, but a dot with touching the edge. So touching the edge means something.
Or what we'll get into in the next episode is you could have a circle with a cross in it, but if one of the arms of the cross is missing, it completely represents something different, which we will explain in our next episode.
Exactly. So, and then there's the hexagram, which is, a 6-sided, point, a star, essentially. And it is the most powerful symbol used to work magic,
Oh, okay. I can picture that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the other two kind of, one conjures, so it has one specific thing, it conjures. The other one specific thing, 5 elements, blah, 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 all within a circle. And then the 6-sided one really works the magic. That's the one that, people put down and they want to do whatever. There's no specific purpose for it. So that is the occult side. Going into the occult more, we talked about the yin and yang. That doesn't really come up in the occult as much. That's more of a Taoist. A lot of principles bleed over into the occult.
Yeah.
But there's the Cross of Nero, which a lot of people... It's the peace sign.
Oh.
It's the peace sign. People think that's like just means peace, love.
Well,
blah,
but
blah.
is it upside down or something? Or
So it's just
like your stereotypical hippie peace sign. Okay,
like that. So yeah, it's stereotypical hippie peace sign, but it mocks the cross of Jesus, is what it is. So it's almost like
how telling that was part of the whole
Exactly.
sexual revolution. Ooh,
And it's just
groundbreaking stuff on Arcanum Theurgy.
So people thought that everyone's like, oh, peace and love, but it's kind of like
See, that's what I'm saying. Symbolism is
opposite.
so important,
And it gets lost in translation, and people
Yes.
are like, "Oh, peace and love," but I'm like, no. And it's actually on the tombstone of a lot of Hitler's SS troops.
Oh, huh.
Yeah, and then kind of not a circle at all, but it kind of ties into this. The SS symbol that you would see on a lot of German uniforms. It's a satanic S that represents a lightning bolt that means destroyer. So it was worn to have power over others, and that kind of goes into the whole like Nazis kind of practice the occult.
Yeah,
They
that's
tried
a
to
common
harness-
thing you hear, yeah.
Yes, and it's very true. So they would wear that to try and have power over, their enemies, people who oppose them. And like I said, that was the symbol of his SS troops. So it had a very strong meaning to him, so much so that he's like, I'm going to put this on all the uniforms that I can. And yeah, he really believed that symbolism and stuff like that really had power over people. It really meant something to people.
I believe it does.
I really do too.
I completely believe it.
I mean,
symbolism is so important, and people who just want to be glib and be like we were talking with a friend of ours last night, and you just rationalize everything away, or people like, I got in an argument with someone once. They were just talking about, oh no, that's not what semiotics is. I'm like, no, you're just talking about like agreed upon representations of things, and saying, listen, this is not what we agreed that the symbol means. You can't say that it means this. I'm talking about the depths of it, like how I explained the gold symbol. Like, there's something that comes through the symbol. It's not just drawing a plus sign and saying this means addition and everyone going, okay, you know what I mean? There's like, it's a gateway to something. It's archetypal representation of something. Yeah, so symbol is very important and fascinating. So.
Very, very important. And like I was saying, Hitler would use these symbols, and it would strike fear or control, which is exactly what he wanted it to do. And again, with the swastika. Now, I'm sure a lot of people think the swastika, and I even have it drawn like this. That's how a lot of people would draw it, and they think that actually is the Nazi symbol. And it is, but at the same time, it isn't. The Nazi symbol is rotated 45 degrees, and it's almost like a perversion of the Buddhist symbol, which is kind of like inner peace,
Right, and it also, in that, you can also, the four elements also come through in the swastika.
Yeah, exactly. So you got like earth, wind, fire, air, and
the quintessence would be represented by the cross,
Exactly.
which, yeah, we'll delve into that in the next episode.
But kind of to wrap it up, he would take that symbol, pervert it, and again, and even nowadays, you look at it, you see a swastika, you know what it means, you know what it represents. It represented fear, power, and it's just, these symbols are important in that way. They really have an effect on people.
Right, and that's another common argument you can get in with people, is people will tell you, whenever someone wants to argue about the meaning of a symbol, they go, "But context matters, bro. Like, look at a swastika in the 30s." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, and I don't care though, because I'm telling you, within that swastika, even in the 30s, there is a deeper meaning. There's there's a built-in meaning in that symbol, and yeah, you can misrepresent it, but it doesn't matter. If anything, you're showing how you're misrepresenting the meaning of the symbol."
Well, that's what people would, that's exact. People are like, well, Hitler it was just a symbol that was his symbol, and a lot of people think.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like the plus sign. Now someone draws a swastika and they go, "This means Nazi," and they go, "Oh,
no, it does not."
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah, it's just agreed upon representation.
Yeah, agreed upon representation because of one isolated incident in history, basically, when in reality it's this big, deep meaning with so much depth.
Yeah.
But Point is that circles all over the place. And they even bleed into other things that aren't even circles, like the lightning bolt symbols, the SS. So, yeah, they're all over.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, I had a couple passages I wanted to read, but I don't know. I might read like one. I don't know.
Well, we're kind of just over a half hour, I think. So I don't know. Whatever you want to do.
I'll read one really quick. It's on the sun and the moon. It is in the 3 books of occult philosophy, written by Henry Cornelius Agrippa and Nettensheim. So, really quick here, I have one on the sun, which the qualities of the seasons. It's just a quick, kind of a representation of the sun in religion. The sun is carried along in the midst of these planets, a body of great size and power. So again, the sun, light, power.
Yeah, okay.
The ruler, not only of the seasons and of the different climates, but also the stars themselves and of the heavens. When we consider his operations, we must regard him as the life, or rather the mind of the universe. So again, that circle, mind of the universe.
Right.
The chief regulator and the god of nature. He also lends his light to the other stars. He is most illustrious and excellent, beholding all things and hearing all things, which I perceive is ascribed to him exclusively by the prince of poets, Homer. And then there's one on the moon, really quick here. The moon, too, as the heavenly body nearest the earth, bestows her effluence most abundantly upon mundane things. For most of them, animate or inanimate, are sympathetic to her and change in company with her. The rivers increase and diminish their streams with her light, the seas turn their own tides with her rising and setting, and plants and animals in whole or in some part wax and wane with her.
Yeah, and that might come through in our next episode, the connection between certain things with the vegetable, like vegetative life forms.
Right.
I was just reading something today about there's some connection, but I still want to run wild. Like,
yeah, because
we got a whole
really
other
easy
episode.
to run wild with this. But
so many connections.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to that, what I just read really quick, it goes back to like an episode or two ago where we talked about how man is the sun reflecting light on the moon, and then the moon reflects that light back, and then we come into the animals and the plants and the tides.
And the connection to the water. And we'll have to do a whole episode on waters, because there's waters is a very complex symbol in alchemy. I don't know much about the occult, what comes through with water. I don't know. So you have waters, corrosive waters, waters being related to female, water being related to Mercury, things coming out of the waters, like we just in my Ouroboros passage, the second one, the Ouroboros came out of the waters. That means something,
right.
There's also talk of waters, I think, on the emerald tablet.
Entering the water too, is that like a...
Probably, yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean, and that's what I'm saying, though, it all means something,
So you can't look at this at surface level. It isn't black and white whatsoever, but... Of course, this is all we were really going to go for this episode. We don't want to, again, go crazy because it's so easy to. So
yeah, I'll just say before we wrap it up, I guess, if you want, on our next episode, you can look forward to the symbolism of the cross and then talking about the elements. So that's what we'll be working on, researching for the next episode.
Yeah, and this is where it'll get a little bit more interesting, because you're talking about the elements, the things that you're supposed to use within alchemy. So with that being said, that is all for this week's episode. I'm Dan Rasanowski.
Joe Schaefer.
And you guys take care. Thank you.